Hey, this is Ramon, Channels Alpha 4, and I thought I'd also clarify something for you all. And that's on calling the early Christian church Catholic. I'm talking pre-schism, I think, 1054, I think is the year of the Great Schism. And I'm doing all this off the top of my head. With the other videos, the Bible basic videos, a lot of that information was coming out of sources like the Holloman Dictionary, the American Bible Dictionary, dictionary concordances for both of those. And then also the introductions to the King James and the introduction to the Oxford Bible and the introduction to other annotated Bibles and stuff like that I like reading. And also some TV shows and YouTube stuff that I like listening to, like Bart Ehrman. But this time, all this is going to come right out of my head. So, the early church, before the Great Schism, was Catholic. By Catholic, I mean universal. And to understand the split, you have to understand that the split didn't come from the Orthodox leaving the Catholic Church. It came from the Church kind of being jerks and excommunicating the Orthodox Church. But the Orthodox Church had patriarchs, and each patriarch was controlled of a different territory. And so there were different churches. There's not just one big church. It's one big church with smaller churches, and under those are the parishes. And a parish is what most Protestants would call a church, with Catholics and Orthodox churches with a capital C, and it stands for the larger body of Christ. Understand that the Pope, the way that they understood it back then, was supposed to be the first among equals. So still equal with the other patriarchs. And a lot of this is going to be kind of historicity, like kind of factual, kind of not. A little bit of legends in here, which is that each apostle, or each of the original 12 disciples, started a church. Obviously not Judas Iscariot, but all the rest of them started an individual church. And so all of the original Christian churches, we're talking all the way from Ethiopia, all the way to Rome, and in Greece, and in Libya, and Syria, each had a founder, which could be traced back to one of the disciples, including one in India. So that's the story, right? Okay. So all those churches are in concord, or in accord, in concert with the Catholic Church. And even after the Great Schism, way later, the Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church made peace and were technically one church again. But they don't submit to papal authority, and the Pope or the Vatican, I should say, because the Pope's pretty cool about things, our current Pope, but the Vatican just kind of tolerates their independence, which is, to me, a really good blueprint for how the Protestant churches, and specifically the Protestant Church, and how the Catholic Church could make amends. But that's a totally different story. Okay, so the entire liturgy and the entire rite of the Orthodox faith and the Catholic faith honor each other's rites and liturgies. But there were other Christianities that existed, such as Gnosticism. But Gnosticism wasn't just one religion. There were actually multiple heresies in Gnosticism. And not all Gnostics were Christians. Okay. Now, you get even a little bit more complicated. All these Christianities that died out early started late, and they had different texts. So, were there other Christianities other than the Catholic Christianity, other than the universal Christianity? Yes, but they all disappeared. Any modern Christianity that exists today is based off of Catholic Christianity that existed back when the Orthodox and the Catholic were one. Okay, so when the Greek and the Latin were one church. Now, there is also Eastern rites that are part of the Catholic Church that are not part of the Orthodox Church, but they have a different liturgy than the Catholic Church. Okay? I know this is all kind of complicated and this is running a little bit long for a short explanation. Okay, now, so can you call the early Christian church Catholic properly? Yes, because the idea is universalism. And when we call the Christian church, what we're talking about is the church based on the gospels that we have today. The gospels that we have and follow today are the gospels from the Christian church. And that church is the Catholic Church. Okay? So the Orthodox Church and the Catholic Church were once one church, and those are the people that canonize the gospels that we all use in the New Testament. But there are other Christian religions that existed at that time, or there were, and they would not be considered Catholic. They would not be part of the universal church. In fact, some of them were, some of the heresies were called elitism or exclusionary. Okay? Now, does that mean what a lot of Protestants think it means? Not exactly. Because technically, Protestantism is considered a heresy in the Catholic Church. I know, I'm not going there. Don't worry, guys. But we don't treat you guys as if you guys are heretical. We simply want you guys back. Kind of like how you guys want us to start believing in the New Testament, which, newsflash, we do. Okay, so you just need to understand that the early church, there were other Christianities that died out that don't exist. And to understand that, you have to understand the goddess Isis, which is a different religion altogether. The ancient Egyptian religion that worshipped Osiris died out and got taken over by Christianity and Coptic Christianity, which are two different forms of Christianity. Coptic is one, Gnostic is another. Think of the Dead Sea Scrolls and that kind of extreme Christianity where no one would get married and sex was a bad thing and where you want to live alone. Okay, so there's different types of sex. Okay, well, while paganism and heathenism was dying out, the worship of Isis continued on all the way into the Enlightenment, and even as late as the Renaissance, there was active worship of Isis. So you need to understand that while there were other Christianities that survived until recent times, those Christianities started after the universal church, and they all ended long before modern day. And some, thanks to New Age movements, have rose up again, and people are now practicing or trying to practice these old versions of Christianity. But it's important to note that just like anyone who practices Wicca is not actually practicing Wicca, because when you practice Wicca, you dedicate yourself to one pantheon or one group of gods, and you just kind of start worshiping by what you think the ancient practices were. And they call that stealing back. And what they do is they look at the Christian traditions and they try to reverse engineer what the ancient practices were. Okay? So when a lot of people try to do that to Catholicism and try to push it back to paganism, understand you're doing the same thing. You're trying to reverse engineer the evolution of religion and piety and the practice of worship. So the church before the schism, before the Great Schism, is just one universal church, and there were other Christianities that don't survive till today, just like there were other pagan religions. There wasn't just one pagan church. There were other different beliefs and practices that also no longer exist today. And the mainline religions that exist today are Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. All of those are Abrahamic religions. But that doesn't mean that Hindu and Buddhist and Taoist and all those other Eastern religions didn't exist. So all those religions exist. Zoroastrianism is still practiced today. Those are other ancient religions that have nothing to do with us. So when I call, or when other Catholics call the early church, or even Orthodox call the early church Catholic, what we're talking about is Christian. And I know for Protestants that's hard to hear because they have a negative connotation with the word universal and with authority. But pre-Protestant Reformation, there was just, if you're following our Bible, the only people following our Bible, the Bible that you Protestants follow in the King James, the only people following that were the Catholics. And by Catholics, I mean both the Orthodox and the Roman. So the Greek and the Roman and the Slavic and the Gothic and all of that, we're all using the same source material. It's the translation of that into a modern language where we start getting into differences of opinions on what the text actually says, which is a whole other controversy to jump into. So there's my not so brief, trying to be very brief explanation of why I and many other philosophical and historically minded people call the early church Catholic. Don't be insulted by that. It's just, if we're talking about the people who believe in Jesus Christ based on the Bible, pre-Protestant Reformation, that just meant Catholic denominations. And then that originally meant Catholic, and there wasn't a split before that. And there were different patriarchs who controlled different territories. And before that, you have the 12 apostles who supposedly founded these different territories, which would become later churches with a capital C. So I just wanted to explain that to you all, so that way you guys are not offended, even though I'm pretty sure a lot of people were. All right.